Your second act isn't just about starting over, it's about starting smarter. You've left what's predictable to follow your passion, and that mix of excitement and uncertainty is real. Welcome to Second Act Business Owner. I'm Lee Gray, and I'm here to make sure your leap of faith lands on solid ground. Each episode, I'm bringing you the real-world MBA training and structure you need to turn chaos into clarity. Stop building someone else's dream and start building a business that works for you. Let's get to work. Well, hello and welcome to the Second Act Business Owner Podcast. I'm your coach, Lee Gray, and today we are going to be talking about the one thing in life that you can never, ever get more of, and that is your time. Now, time is the most precious commodity, especially for a second act business owner, because we might be trying to do something in 10 or 20 years when in our 20s we have 40, 50, or we think 100 years to get something done. So I'm going to give you some tips and strategies today to help you, number one, identify where you're spending your time. Trust me, I've been a coach for a long time, and I know that we think we spend time on important things when we really don't. So we're going to I'm going to give you some strategies for figuring out where you spend your time, and then I'm going to give you some strategies for creating an ideal week by using a default calendar, and then I'm going to give you some concepts and ways to look at the way you spend your time. But the one thing, if nothing else is remembered from this episode today, remember this. You need to be spending your time on revenue-generating activities, and that is not things like typing an email that doesn't need to go out. It is about revenue-generating activities. So clearly in your head, you must know, what are the revenue-generating activities for my business? So let's get started. I don't want to waste any more of your time. Here we go. First thing I want to talk about is Stephen Covey, whom I have so much respect for. Several books he's written. One famous book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about the Eisenhower matrix. It's called that, and people call it other things. Basically, there's 4 quadrants, and we'll just put things into quadrant 1 first. And quadrant 1 are things that are urgent and important. So as you're starting your second act, urgent and important things might be to get your product line clear. Urgent and important. Do the research that you need to do to get your business started, file your paperwork, form your LLC, those kinds of things. Urgent and important. Do first, right? And then there are things that are important but not urgent. Those are things like getting your website is important. It's not urgent, though. You can start selling your business, most likely, unless you're a dependent website. But that could be something that you would consider really important, but not urgent. In other words, you're going to schedule it and you're going to plan for it. So Q1 has things that are urgent and important that we've got to get done, or we can't do things in quadrant 2, which are important but not urgent. Those are things we schedule and even delegate. So ideally, you would delegate the website process after you've had a strategic meeting, which is actually in quadrant 4. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So quadrant 3 then is urgent but not important. So like the neighbor is calling you to say your dog is out. Yeah, that's urgent and it's kind of important, but it isn't something you're going to focus on. You're going to delegate that. And other urgent and important things are like people interrupting you or having a conversation about the football game over the weekend. To them, it's urgent and important, but it's not important to you. It's urgent because they're coming at you. They're in your face or they're bothering you, taking your time. Q4 then are things that are not urgent but important. A good example of things that are not urgent and important are listening to podcasts about how to start your second act business. Honestly, those are things that you don't have to do. It's not urgent. You can put it off forever and ever and ever. Is it important? Yes, because you want to have a successful business. So this kind of learning, this sort of strategic planning, and when I talked earlier about the website, that's a strategic planning thing that you want to put in your not urgent but important quadrant 4. So if you want to get the book, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits to Highly Successful People, I highly recommend listening to it on Audible. It's a great book. You can listen to it multiple times and continue to learn tips and strategies. And because, think about it, we do bring some big bad habits with us in our second act because we've had a lot of practice doing them. So there are some things we have to learn. Luckily, we're smarter than we've ever been today, so we have the resources to do that. Okay, so I want to give you a tip, and this is the 3 Ds. We call it do, delegate, dump. And especially now in your second act, you don't have time for crap, right? So when something comes on your plate, when someone throws something upon your plate, you do something about it, or you delegate it, or you dump it. And when you have those 3 strategies, it's life-changing. It's so freeing to say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I'm dumping it. And so the 3 Ds and the Eisenhower quadrant. Next thing I want to take you through is something we do and with my coaching clients, and I have for myself, and that's to have a default calendar. And first of all, you're going to say, my life is too crazy and chaotic. I can't possibly have a default calendar. But you can have a default calendar. It's just understand the word default. It's just a default. Even a busy surgeon has a default calendar. I start surgery at 8, I get done at noon. Well, the surgery goes over until 1. You continue to do the surgery. You just move the schedule the rest of the day. So the default calendar works for the surgeons, and it works for people in their second act business. First thing you do to create a default calendar is identify the areas where you have to work. So here's, generally speaking, in business, you have operations, you have sales, you have team, you have product, you have admin. Generally speaking, I also would add networking to that, and there may be a little bit of a different category depending on how far you are in your second act. So think about those categories, and I love writing the categories on a whiteboard. And then I ask my clients, okay, now how many hours are you spending in this category? How many hours are you spending in this category? Here's what usually happens. At the end of the week, they tell me, I don't know where the week went. I got nothing done. And then we go and we categorize their time in these categories, and they put 3 hours, 5 hours, 2 hours, and sometimes it's more than 40. Well, how can that be if you didn't get anything done? It's because there was not a time set to do the work, to do the activity, even to do the things that are relaxing kinds of things. I love it when people include those in their default calendar. And by the way, default calendar has a lunch in it every day. And I don't care if you don't eat or not, you still take a lunch. That's what I'm telling you to do, take a lunch. So you've decided your categories, and then you get really, you know that when you're starting your second act early on, you're going to be doing networking and marketing and cold calling and talking to people. Probably 8 hours of your day is going to be, or 8 hours of your week is going to be in that category. And just decide how many hours you need to do in each of the categories to be successful in your second act. Then you actually literally put it on a calendar, and you shade the calendar in color based on the category that it is. And you can do this in your Google Calendar. You can do this in your Outlook calendar. I have a default calendar that is a perfect week that I have set up in Outlook. I happen to use Outlook. And so I have a separate calendar called Lee's Default Calendar, has a perfect week in it. So I want to focus on the default calendar for just a moment. First things first, don't worry. It's not a perfection tool. It's a tool to help you get better. It's not a perfect thing. It doesn't have to be. In fact, it never will be perfect. If you think about a default calendar, it's your ideal week. You're going to do your best to work to that default, and then you're going to make adjustments. So for me, I'm a morning person when it comes to doing things that require a lot of thinking. So I'm going to put the admin sort of stuff and non-sales, non-revenue generating activities early in the morning, because for me, that's when I'm best at that. And it took me time to look at that. I set up my default calendar initially thinking I was going to do stuff all day long. It didn't work for me. And neither for my clients. They realize that they can't do the same thing all day long. So fixing that in the default calendar, maybe putting some admin Friday morning, some admin Thursday morning, and that's it. The other thing about the default calendar that's really important to remember is, look, if you go on vacation, don't worry about it. Your default calendar, it stays where it is. You go on and you have your vacation. If you have a giant project for a customer and you can't do any revenue generating activities outside of that work, That's okay. That week is different. That's an anomaly. Actually, no week is the same. I think that's the most important thing to remember about the default calendar is it's a tool. It's you try it, you test it and see. But here's the cool thing about the default calendar. And if let's say you're appointment driven like I am, I work on appointments all day. And things happen. People have to skip a meeting. I suddenly have an hour in my calendar I wasn't planning to have. And what a gift. So I'm learning in my default calendar. One of the ways I use my default calendar is to have a list of tasks that need to be done that are not urgent but important. And I use those tasks to fill that free gift of time that I was given when I have an hour. So sometimes the default calendar, the hardest part is figuring out what to do when you get a free hour. And it happens in all of our businesses. If electricians, it happens, oh my gosh, the customer isn't home. It happens to real estate agents. Of course, we talked about it happens to surgeons as well. Surgery goes over, surgery gets done quicker, but the default calendar still remains. And then just readjust it. Like last week, we had all of our clients together to do end of year planning, and it was a full day. They couldn't do their regular default calendar for that day, and that's okay. They were working in quadrant 4, so you still have to do that. So default calendar is your tool. Default calendar is your weapon. Think about the default calendar as your friend. The other thing I want you to think about is revenue generating activity. Because if you're spending all your time doing admin and following up and doing stuff that doesn't generate activity, well, you might not be in business very long. So think about prioritizing your revenue generating activities. So you're going to, number 1, track what you do for a week. What? I don't have time to track what I do. Yes, you do. That's the only way to really know what it is that you do. And you're going to love me for this. You're going to get a 25% productivity boost just by tracking your time. It's just like going on a diet. If you weigh every day, and you know you're going to get on the scale, you're going to make changes. So track what you do in 15-minute increments. Oh, I know you're too busy to do 15-minute increments. But it's your second act. You're going to invest in your second act, aren't you? Of course you are, because it's worth it. You're going to be a rock star. You are a rock star. I have these tools available to you, and they're going to be in the show notes of this episode. So I'm going to be giving you a default calendar template and a time study tool that you can use to capture all the time that you spend and your default calendar. But I think that why it's important really is think about it. You're in your second act. You may be 30, 40, 50. You may be 60. I have worked with people who started their second act in their 70s. And I mean, ain't wasting any time in their 70s. They are pounding through and can say no to anything. You talk about do, dump, delegate. That is their persona. Not doing it if it's not making me money. Delegate it if it's not making me money. If it's making me money, I'm going to do it. When you have your default calendar and you live by your default calendar and you establish do, delegate, dump, and you prioritize the quadrants that I spoke about, acknowledging things that are not important but urgent. Things that are not urgent and not important in quadrant 3, things like texts and phone calls, that you don't need to take. When you move away from those and you gain 20% of your week back, that's a day. That's a day a week. And if you think about that's 52 days a year that you gain back with the discipline of creating a default calendar. Can you talk about your business? Can you sell some product in your business if you have 52 days to do it? Absolutely you can. And that's what this tool is all about. Deciding where I'm going to spend my time, being absolutely vicious about protecting it, and making sure that my top priorities are around generating revenue. Because that stuff, cleaning your desktop or whatever, feels like it's work, but that's the stuff that at the end of the week you're going to say, man, I was really busy and I got nothing done. So focusing on the priorities that for your business is revenue generating activities. And honestly, 30, 40% of your time spent on revenue generating activities, you're going to be talking about selling your second business act in 10 years or less. So if that's what you want to do, if you want to have a successful business, you really have to start with some of the foundations of structure, and the default calendar is one. Okay, as a reminder, these tools are in the show notes, so download them, use them, enjoy them, share them, and make them work for your business. Make them work to grow your second act. You deserve it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a review. Please like this. It really helps us if you do. Leave us a review and share this podcast with another person who's thinking or in the middle of or halfway through or almost ending their second act, because we're going to be focusing on your second act wherever you are. I tell you, what I feel like expressing today is just talking about time and how important it is, and that we all only have a small amount of it left, right? I mean, we don't know how much time we have left. I feel like talking about time in business is probably one of the most I feel like talking about time and how we spend our time in business is one of the most underserved conversations. We need to talk about the importance of where we spend our time. And that's what I feel like expressing. What do you feel like expressing?
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.